this thing of the world appearing to be a very different place depending on what kind of animal you are was something we came across when we were in China. We went to look for an animal called the baiji, which is the Yangtze River dolphin, which is an almost blind form of dolphin. The reason it's almost blind is that there's nothing to see in the Yangtze River. Many, many years of agriculture, thousands of years of agriculture along the banks of the Yangtze have washed more and more topsoil and silt into the river, so it's become increasingly turbid, and the visibility is virtually nil within the river. Now, this is fine as far as the dolphins are concerned, because dolphins have a capacity to learn sonar techniques. So the dolphins navigate their way around the river by sonar, and modelling the world in sound can be almost, so far as we can tell, almost as detailed and accurate and three-dimensionally informative as vision. It's hard for us to visualize, and the word I say, the word itself is a clue, because we are very much light-oriented, sight-oriented animals. It's hard for us to, it's hard not to say visualize, it's hard for us to visualize what the world would look like if you perceived it in sound. But anyway, that's what the dolphins do. And this is fine up to the point when man, God bless him, then discovers the diesel engine. And having up to that point been filling the Yangtze with silt, with sewage, with every kind of waste that we want to get rid of, now starts to fill it with noise as well. And as a result, many of the dolphins are continually, whereas previously they were able, as I say, to model their world fantastically accurately in sound, and find their way around it as easily as you and I can find our way around a room, they're now bumping into boats and getting caught up in ships' propellers or caught up in fishermen's nets. They're obviously being thoroughly disoriented by this noise. So we arrived there and we thought we'd better find out what it sounds like in the Yangtze River. Because it's hard for us to get a kind of feel of what this is like. And we were recording this for the BBC, and we had a BBC sound engineer with us. And we said, let's record what it sounds like in the Yangtze River. And he said, well, I wish you'd told me that before we left London. And I said, why? And he said, well, you know, you can't just stick a microphone in the water. You need a hydrophone. You need an underwater microphone. I haven't got one. And, you know, if you tell me we can find one in Shanghai. So I said, well, I really want to record this noise. What are we going to do? And he said, well, there is an emergency technique we're taught in the BBC. There is a way you can waterproof a microphone in an emergency. I mean, sound quality won't be that good. But I said, well, it doesn't matter about sound quality. I mean, what's the technique? And he said, well, what you do is you get an ordinary microphone and you stick it in a condom. And he looked at me and my colleague Mark and said, have either of you got condoms with you? And we said, no, we hadn't. It wasn't that kind of trip. So we had to go and spend a happy afternoon in Shanghai trying to buy a pack of condoms. Now, we all know about the Chinese policy of towards population. So we thought it was going to be a lot easier to find condoms than it actually turned out to be. So I want to read you a short passage about this. Trying to buy condoms in Shanghai. The friendship store seemed like a promising place. The friendship store seemed like a promising place to buy condoms. But we had a certain amount of difficulty in getting the idea across. We passed from one counter to another in the large open-plan department store, which consists of many different individual booths, stalls and counters, but no one was able to help us. We first started at the stalls which looked as if they sold medical supplies, but had no luck. By the time we got to the stalls which sold bookends and chopsticks, we knew we were onto a loser. But at least we found a young shop assistant who spoke English. We tried to explain to her what it was we wanted, but seemed to reach the limit of her vocabulary pretty quickly. I got out my notebook and drew a condom very carefully. including a little extra balloon on the end. She frowned at it, but still didn't get the idea. She brought us a wooden spoon, a candle, a sort of paper knife, and, surprisingly enough, a small porcelain model of the Eiffel Tower. And then at last lapsed into a posture of defeat. Some other girls from the stall gathered round to help, but they were also defeated by our picture. At last I plucked up the bravado to perform a delicate little mime. And at last the penny dropped. "Ah," the first girl said, suddenly wreathing with smiles. "Ah, yes." They all beamed delightedly at us as they got the idea. You do understand?" I asked. Yes, yes, I understand." "Do you have any?" No," she said, "not have." "Oh, but. Yes? I say you where you go, okay? Oh, well, thank you very much, thank you. You go 616 Nanjing Road, okay, have there. You ask Rubber Over, okay? Rubber Over? Rubber Over, you ask, they have. Okay, have a nice day. We thanked them again profusely and left with much waving and smiling. The news seemed to have spread very quickly around the store, and everybody waved at us. When we reached 616 Nanjing Road, our pronunciation of Rubber Over seemed to let us down and produce another wave of baffled incomprehension. This time I went straight for the mime that had served us so well before, and it seemed to do the trick at once. The shop assistant, a slightly more middle-aged lady with severe hair, marched straight to a cabinet of drawers, brought us back a packet, and placed it triumphantly on the counter in front of us. Success, we thought. Opened a packet and found it to contain a bubble sheet of pills. Right idea, said Mark with a sigh. Wrong method. We were quickly floundering again as we tried to explain to the now slightly affronted lady that it wasn't precisely what we were after. By this time, a crowd of about 15 onlookers had gathered around, some of whom I was convinced had followed us all the way from the Friendship store. One of the things you quickly discover in China is that we are all at the zoo. If you stand still for a minute, people will gather around and stare at you. The unnerving thing is they don't stare at you inquisitively or intently. They just stand there, often right in front of you, and watch you as blankly as if you were a dog food commercial. At last, one young and pasty-faced man with glasses pushed through the crowd and said he spoke a little English and could he help. We thanked him and said yes, we wanted to buy some condoms, some rubber overs, and we'd be very grateful if he'd explain that for us. He looked puzzled, picked up the rejected packet lying on the counter in front of the affronted shop assistant, and said, "Not want rubber over, pill better." "No," Mark said, "we definitely want rubber over, not pills." "Why want rubber over? Pill better." "You tell him," said Mark. "It's to record dolphins," I said, or not the actual dolphins, in fact. What we want to record is the noise and the anxiety that is to go with the microphone, you see, and, oh, just tell him you want to fuck someone, and you can't wait. But by now the young man was edging nervously away from us, suddenly realizing that we were dangerously insane and should simply be humoured and escaped from. He said something hurriedly to the shop assistant and backed away into the crowd. The shop assistant shrugged, scooped up the pills, opened another drawer and pulled out a packet of condoms. We bought 9, just to be safe. And finally, we did manage, therefore, to make a recording underwater in the Yangtze River. We got we stuck the condom over the microphone and dangled it, this little sort of pink thing in the river, and recorded the noise it makes. And I can actually do an impression of the noise that you hear in the Yangtze River. And the noise is this. Yangtze River. Thank you very much. It's pure white noise. And this is the noise that these creatures, these dolphins, who live by sound, have to live in. It's kind of, if you imagine if one was actually sort of trapped in a light show in a sort of underground discotheque, which is also full of sewage, and somebody's sort of flashing strobe lights in your eyes, after a while you become seriously disoriented. And you would, apart from anything else, you'd complain to the management. So if you try and work out what this must be like for the dolphins living in our sewage, can't see anything, and are now orally blinded, so to speak, it's exactly the same thing for them, only they can't complain to the management, they have to wait for the management to notice. And it becomes kind of terrifying when you sort of, we never managed to see one of these dolphins, except the one that was in captivity. It was kind of terrifying sitting on the edge, and the reason, of course, we couldn't see one is because you can't see anything in the Yangtze River. And I can't tell you how many thousands of miles it was to discover that. But you're sitting on the edge of a boat, thinking, well, there may be a dolphin within a few yards of me, there may not be. Probably not, because there are only, I think, about 200 left in a stretch of water 200 miles long. But because you're sitting there in the world, and the world seems to be perfectly comfortable to you, you're sort of sitting on the edge of a boat, and it's quite a balmy day, you think, well, the world is fine. But when you try and put yourself in the sensory world of this dolphin that, as I say, lives by sound, but is actually getting caught up in fishermen's nets and bumping into boats and getting caught up in ships' propellers and doing all this in sewage, you think, well, this animal is actually living in a species of hell, but you actually have to make a huge perceptual jump, huge imaginative perceptual jump, in order to see that. And normally we don't, because we see the world the way we see it through our own perceptual system, and we don't realize we're using a perceptual system, and we think that what we see is some complete account of the world, and it isn't. Every animal models the world itself, and depending on the kind of animal you are and the kind of way you live in the world will appear to be a very, very different place to you. Now, before I went and did all this, I actually